My name is Beatrice Reynolds, 35 years old, born into a tech dynasty my parents built from scratch. With a computer science degree from MIT and an MBA from Stanford, I never imagined being sidelined in our family business. When my younger brother Michael became CEO instead of me, I swallowed my pride and stayed loyal, until he changed. Until he dismissed my expertise with those words that changed everything. "You don't understand this empire, sis." Family business betrayals cut deeper than any corporate knife ever could. Before I tell you how I brought our entire multi-million-dollar operation to a standstill, let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and subscribe if family business drama is your thing. I was always the computer geek in the family. While other 8-year-old girls were playing with dolls, I was taking apart our family computer and putting it back together. My parents, Diana and Robert Reynolds, encouraged my curiosity. They had started Nexus Data Systems in 1985 from our garage in Seattle, back when data storage meant physical tapes and clunky drives. My mom was the technical genius, and my dad handled the business side. Their partnership was perfect, and I grew up watching them build something incredible together. By the time I was applying to colleges, Nexus had grown into a respected regional data management company with 50 employees. I remember the pride on my parents' faces when I got accepted to MIT for computer science. They told me I could forge my own path, but deep down I think they always hoped I would come back and help take the company to the next level. Those 4 years at MIT shaped me profoundly. I thrived in the competitive environment, graduating in the top 5% of my class. My senior project on predictive data security caught the attention of several major tech firms, and I had lucrative offers from companies in Silicon Valley. But I decided to continue my education, earning my MBA from Stanford to round out my technical skills with business acumen. During my second year at Stanford, my younger brother Michael decided to follow in my footsteps, sort of. He enrolled at UCLA for business with a minor in computer science. Michael was always more outgoing than me, the charismatic one who could charm anyone. Where I was methodical and detail-oriented, he was big picture and people-focused. We were different, but we shared that passion for technology that our parents had instilled in us. After finishing my MBA, despite receiving 6-figure offers from major tech companies, I decided to join the family business. Nexus had grown substantially by then, with clients across the western United States and nearly 120 employees. I started as a project manager in the security division, determined to earn my place rather than be handed one because of my last name. Those first few years were incredible. I implemented new security protocols that reduced breach incidents by 78%. I modernized our infrastructure, transitioning clients to cloud-based solutions while maintaining rigid security standards. My innovations helped Nexus expand from simple data storage to comprehensive enterprise data management. Michael joined the company 5 years after I did, bringing his fresh MBA and natural sales abilities. Where I had focused on strengthening our technical foundation, he excelled at client relations and marketing. His campaigns increased our client base by 40% in just 2 years. We complemented each other perfectly, often joking that we had each inherited one half of our parents' business partnership model. Some of my favorite memories are from the joint projects we led together. Michael would identify client needs through his relationship-building skills, and I would develop the technical solutions to meet those needs. We created customized data management systems for healthcare providers that became an industry benchmark. Together, we expanded Nexus into adjacent markets, offering cybersecurity services alongside our traditional data management. As our parents approached their 60s, conversations about succession planning became more frequent. During Sunday dinners at their house, they would talk about the future of Nexus. I remember my father saying, "When you two take over, Nexus will reach heights we never dreamed possible." The language was always about you two, and together implying a joint leadership model that made perfect sense given our complementary skills. My vision for Nexus included expanding our security services division, which had become increasingly profitable under my leadership. I wanted to position us as the premier data security provider for medium-sized enterprises, a niche that larger security firms often overlooked. Michael supported this vision, adding that we could leverage our security reputation to enter new geographic markets. As part of the succession planning, our parents brought in outside board members to provide objective governance. They selected industry veterans and business leaders who understood our market but had no personal ties to our family. I appreciated this professional approach to what could have been a purely emotional family decision. During this transition period, I developed proprietary security systems that became our primary selling point. Our competitors offered similar data management services, but none could match our security protocols. What no one except a handful of senior engineers knew was that I had built backdoor protocols into these systems. These weren't security flaws, but rather emergency measures that could override normal operations if a critical threat was detected. I created these backdoors with the blessing of our chief security officer, who understood the need for such emergency protocols. With Michael focusing on sales and client relationships, we expanded internationally, opening offices in Toronto and London. Our revenues doubled in 3 years, and industry publications began featuring Nexus as a success story in the competitive data management space. We were named one of the fastest-growing private tech companies by Business Technology magazine 2 years running. The initial transition of power went smoothly, with our parents gradually stepping back from daily operations. They remained on the board but delegated most decisions to the executive team, which included Michael and me, among others. We worked together harmoniously, respecting each other's domains of expertise, while collaborating on major strategic decisions. At least, that was how it seemed. The email came on a Tuesday afternoon, scheduling an emergency board meeting for Thursday morning. No agenda was attached, which struck me as odd. When I texted Michael about it, he responded with a vague, "Just some restructuring stuff Dad wants to formalize." I thought nothing of it, assuming it was another step in our parents' gradual transition out of the company. When I walked into the boardroom that Thursday, the atmosphere felt strange. The outside board members avoided eye contact, and my mother seemed unusually focused on arranging her notepads. Michael sat next to our father, both in matching navy suits, both wearing expressions I couldn't quite read. My father cleared his throat and called the meeting to order. As you all know, Diana and I have been working on succession planning for Nexus as we prepare for our retirement. After careful consideration and discussions with our advisors, we have decided that clear, singular leadership is what Nexus needs going forward. I felt a slight unease, but assumed he was talking about formalizing the joint leadership structure Michael and I had effectively been operating under for the past year. Then my father continued. The board has unanimously approved Michael Reynolds as the new Chief Executive Officer of Nexus Data Systems, effective immediately. The room seemed to tilt slightly. I maintained my professional composure, smiling stiffly, as everyone turned to gauge my reaction. Inside, I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. There had been no discussions, no warnings, nothing to prepare me for this announcement. My mother spoke next, her rehearsed speech about united vision and clear leadership washing over me as I tried to process what was happening. Beatrice will continue as our Chief Technology Officer, reporting to Michael, she concluded, as if this were the most natural arrangement in the world. The meeting continued with discussions of transition logistics and communication plans. I contributed appropriately, asking the right questions and offering support for the new structure. No one in that room would have guessed that I was experiencing the greatest betrayal of my professional life. After the meeting, I requested a private conversation with my parents. In my father's office, I finally asked the question, why wasn't I considered for the CEO position? My mother took my hand, her expression softening. Sweetie, you are brilliant with technology, the best in the business. But Michael has the people skills needed for a CEO. He can charm clients, manage the board, and be the public face of Nexus. You're better behind the scenes, making the technical magic happen. We always said we would lead together, I reminded them, keeping my voice steady. And you will, my father insisted. You'll be partners, just with clear reporting lines to prevent conflicts. Michael will rely on you for all technical decisions. I left that meeting with promises from Michael that nothing would really change, that we would continue our collaborative approach, that my voice would remain equally important in strategic decisions. I wanted to believe him. For the first few weeks, Michael maintained the appearance of our partnership. He consulted me on major decisions and included me in all executive meetings, but subtle shifts began to occur. The executive assistant who had supported both of us was reassigned exclusively to Michael. The office next to his, which had been earmarked for me in the recent renovation, was instead given to a new Chief Operating Officer, Bradford White, who Michael hired from his business school network. Within 3 months, my title changed from Chief Technology Officer to Director of Legacy Systems. The explanation was that we needed to clarify roles for outside stakeholders. My office was relocated from the executive floor to a smaller space near the IT department. The rationale: I would be closer to the technical teams. The strategic meetings I had once been integral to now happened without my knowledge, with summaries sent afterward for my information. Projects I had initiated were reassigned or cancelled without consultation. My security concerns were dismissed as excessive caution during quarterly planning meetings. I still remember sitting in the company cafeteria and overhearing two middle managers discussing my demotion. One said to the other, "Family business politics, you know. Word is, she doesn't have the leadership qualities her brother has." I abandoned my lunch and returned to my office humiliated. The final straw came in the form of a company-wide email announcing a restructuring of the technical division to better align with our forward-looking strategy. The email, bearing Michael's signature but clearly written by the new marketing director, informed the company that my team would be disbanded, with members reassigned to various projects under the new Chief Innovation Officer, another of Michael's business school friends. I tried repeatedly to discuss the situation with Michael, but his assistant kept rescheduling our meetings due to his packed calendar. When I approached our parents, they disengaged from the conflict, telling me that they had fully stepped back from operations and that these were business, not family matters. As months passed, I found myself increasingly isolated. Colleagues who had once sought my input now directed their questions to my replacement. The innovative security protocols I had developed were being phased out in favor of more cost-effective solutions from outside vendors. My expertise, once the cornerstone of Nexus's competitive advantage, had become an afterthought. One Friday afternoon, I received a meeting invitation for Monday morning with the subject line, "Technical Division Final Restructuring." Attached was a document outlining the complete dissolution of my remaining team, with a note requesting my transition plan by end of day. This was no longer about my pride or position. This was about the security infrastructure I had built, being dismantled by people who didn't fully understand it. I had to speak with Michael directly, no matter what. I bypassed Michael's assistant and walked directly into his new expansive corner office on Monday morning. The space had been completely remodeled since our father occupied it, now featuring sleek modern furniture and floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the Seattle skyline. Michael looked up from his dual-monitor setup, surprise briefly crossing his face before he composed himself into what I had come to think of as his CEO expression. "Beatrice," he said, leaning back in his ergonomic chair, "I don't recall having a meeting scheduled." "We need to talk about this restructuring plan," I said, placing the printed document on his glass desk. "You're dismantling critical security infrastructure without understanding the implications." Michael sighed, the kind of patronizing sigh that made my blood pressure rise. "We've contracted with Global Secure for our security needs moving forward. Their off-the-shelf solutions cost 40% less than maintaining your custom systems. Their solutions have known vulnerabilities," I countered, pulling up technical specifications on my tablet. "Look at these breach reports from the past 6 months alone." Michael barely glanced at the data. "Their client list includes companies 10 times our size. If their security is good enough for them, it's good enough for us." "That's not how security works," I insisted, frustration mounting. "Each system needs customized protection based on its specific architecture." That's when he said it with a dismissive wave of his hand. "You don't understand this empire, sis. Business is about efficiency and growth, not perfect security that costs a fortune to maintain. We're not a security company. We're a data management company." The condescension in his voice took me back to childhood disagreements, where he would inevitably win by getting our parents to intervene. But this wasn't about who got to choose the movie on family night. This was about the company our parents had built, the company I had dedicated my career to strengthening. "The empire, as you call it, was built on the promise of uncompromised data security," I said, keeping my voice calm despite my anger. "That's our differentiator in the market." "Was our differentiator?" he corrected. "Our new value proposition is integrated data solutions with competitive pricing. The market has changed, Beatrice. You would know that if you spent more time with clients and less time with code." Our conversation deteriorated from there, with Michael making it clear that the decisions had been finalized, and my role was simply to implement them. As I left his office, I realized how complete the transformation had been. My brother, once my closest ally, had become a corporate stereotype, prioritizing short-term profits over long-term sustainability. The tension between us spilled over into family gatherings. Sunday dinners at our parents' house, once filled with laughter and comfortable conversation, became battlefields of passive-aggressive comments and strained silences. Michael would mention record new client acquisitions while looking pointedly at me, as if daring me to question his leadership. Our parents attempted to maintain family harmony through careful topic selection and strategic seating arrangements, but the undercurrent of tension remained palpable. I noticed our mother watching us with sad eyes, as Michael and I exchanged clipped responses across the dinner table. The dynamic shifted further when Michael began bringing members of his executive team to family events. Bradford, the COO, appeared at our father's birthday celebration. Jennifer, the marketing director, joined us for Thanksgiving dinner. These additions changed the nature of our family gatherings, transforming them into extensions of office politics rather than respites from them. One evening, after everyone else had left a family dinner, my mother pulled me aside. "You and Michael need to find a way to work together," she said, her expression concerned. "Your father and I built Nexus as partners with mutual respect." "I've tried, Mom," I replied, the weight of months of frustration in my voice. "But Michael doesn't see me as a partner. He sees me as an obstacle to his vision." "Give him time," she urged. "Leadership is new to him. He's finding his way." But time only widened the gap between us. At work, my remaining responsibilities were further reduced. My budget was cut, my access to certain systems restricted for streamlined security protocols. Late one night, I received a call from James, a senior engineer who had been with the company since before I joined. "Beatrice, something's happening with the security protocols," he said, his voice low, as if afraid of being overheard. "They're removing critical verification steps from the client data access pathway." I went into the office, immediately working through the night to identify the changes. What I discovered alarmed me. The new system implementation had removed 3 layers of security verification that my system had required for accessing sensitive client data. I documented the vulnerabilities and sent an urgent email to Michael and the executive team. The next morning, a low-level security breach occurred through exactly the pathway I had identified. I worked with the security team to contain it before any significant data was compromised. Hours later, a company-wide email went out from Michael's office. "Thanks to our proactive security measures, a potential breach was identified and neutralized this morning. This incident validates our new streamlined security approach, which detected and responded to the threat with unprecedented efficiency." The email made no mention of my warning or the fact that the breach would have been prevented entirely under my original security protocols. When I confronted Michael about this misrepresentation, he dismissed my concerns. "The bottom line is that our system worked," he said. "No client data was compromised, and we resolved the issue quickly. That's what matters." "But the breach only happened because you removed the safeguards I built," I pointed out. "Your safeguards were excessive and slowed down our processes," he countered. "Our current approach balances security with usability." My concerns about data protection grew as I observed more changes being implemented without proper security testing. I documented each vulnerability I identified and submitted formal recommendations, all of which were acknowledged with automated responses but never addressed. The stress began affecting my health. I developed insomnia, lying awake worrying about inevitable security failures. I lost weight. My appetite diminished by constant anxiety. Friends commented on my appearance, noting the dark circles under my eyes and my diminished energy. Despite everything, I couldn't bring myself to leave Nexus. It wasn't just a job to me. It was my heritage, my contribution to my family's legacy. I believed that eventually the technical realities would vindicate my concerns. I just needed to find a way to make Michael and the board understand the risks they were taking before it was too late. One Tuesday night, long after most employees had gone home, I remained at the office, reviewing the updated system architecture diagrams. The transition to global secure systems was nearly complete, and I wanted to understand exactly how the new infrastructure was configured before I lost access entirely. As I traced data pathways through the network schematic, I noticed something that made me sit up straight. There was a connection point between 2 server clusters that bypassed normal authentication protocols. At first, I thought it must be a documentation error, but further investigation confirmed it was an actual implementation. This vulnerability wasn't just a weakness, it was a gaping hole in our security. Anyone who discovered this pathway could potentially access the entire system with minimal credentials. I checked and rechecked my analysis, hoping to find some additional security measure I had overlooked, but there was nothing. This was a catastrophic design flaw. I immediately drafted a detailed report documenting the vulnerability and its potential consequences. According to my calculations, a malicious actor exploiting this weakness could access client data across our entire system within minutes. The financial and reputational damage would be incalculable. As I prepared to send the report, a memory surfaced. Years ago, when implementing my original security system, I had created an emergency override protocol, a master key of sorts, that could initiate a controlled shutdown of all systems in case of a detected attack. This protocol had been documented and approved by the senior leadership team at the time, including our parents, but had likely been forgotten during the recent transitions. I searched through archived files and found the original documentation. The protocol specified that a physical security key paired with digital authentication could trigger a system-wide protective shutdown. The shutdown would temporarily take systems offline, but would preserve all data integrity and prevent unauthorized access during a security event. The master key should have been stored in the secure vault in the IT department. On a hunch, I checked my old desk drawer, the one I rarely opened anymore. There, in a small envelope labeled Emergency Protocol, was the key. In the rush to implement the new systems, everyone had forgotten about this emergency measure, including me, until this moment. I sat at my desk, turning the key over in my hands, considering my options. I could submit another report that would likely be ignored like all the others. I could try again to schedule a meeting with Michael, which would probably be postponed indefinitely. Or I could demonstrate just how vulnerable our systems had become in a way that couldn't be ignored. The ethical implications weighed heavily on me. Deliberately shutting down the company's systems, even temporarily, could be seen as sabotage. But allowing this vulnerability to remain unaddressed was, in my professional judgment, guaranteed to result in a significant breach eventually. I reviewed all my previous warnings and recommendations, dozens of emails and reports spanning months, all acknowledging receipt, but taking no action. I had exhausted every proper channel for addressing my concerns. Next, I carefully calculated what a controlled shutdown would entail. If executed before business hours, the actual disruption to clients would be minimal. The systems could be brought back online within hours with no data loss. It would be inconvenient and alarming, but not damaging in the long term. I decided to consult Walter Green, my former mentor, and the retired chief security officer who had helped design the original security protocols. Without revealing my specific intentions, I described the vulnerability and the resistance I had encountered in addressing it. Sometimes, Walter said after listening intently, people don't understand the importance of security until they see the consequences of its absence. As security professionals, our primary obligation is to the integrity of the data we're entrusted with protecting. His words solidified my resolve. I spent the next several hours creating comprehensive documentation proving the vulnerability existed and demonstrating how easily it could be exploited. I prepared simplified explanations for board members without technical backgrounds, using analogies and visual aids to make the severity clear. I reviewed the company bylaws to confirm that my planned demonstration, while dramatic, wasn't technically illegal. As a senior executive with security clearance, I was authorized to implement emergency protocols if I identified a critical threat to system integrity. This vulnerability certainly qualified. I also drafted a detailed letter explaining the security vulnerabilities for Harold Jensen, the company's lawyer who had been with us since the beginning. Harold understood the technical aspects of our business better than most, and had always valued security as much as my parents had. That night I barely slept. I wrestled with doubts about whether I was crossing a line that couldn't be uncrossed, whether this would permanently damage my relationship with Michael and my parents. But when I imagined the alternative, a massive data breach affecting thousands of clients, whose information we were obligated to protect, I knew I had to act. Morning arrived, and I dressed with particular care, selecting a conservative charcoal suit that projected professionalism. I felt oddly calm, like a surgeon preparing for a difficult but necessary procedure. The anxiety that had plagued me for months had been replaced by clarity of purpose. I had made my decision. The demonstration would proceed. If this cost me my position at Nexus, so be it. I couldn't stand by and watch the company my family had built become vulnerable to attacks that could destroy it completely. Sometimes the only way to save something you love is to be willing to risk losing it. I arrived at the office building at 5:30 in the morning, well before the usual start of business. The security guard at the front desk, Frank, greeted me with familiar warmth. "Early start today, Miss Reynolds," he asked as I signed in. "Critical updates to implement," I replied, with a smile that betrayed none of my intentions. The office was eerily quiet, the banks of cubicles empty, and the conference rooms dark. As I walked through the development floor toward the executive suite, my footsteps echoed slightly on the polished concrete floors. This building, with its modern design and open-concept workspaces, had always filled me with pride. Today it felt like a stage set for what could be my final act at Nexus. I paused outside Michael's office, my hand on the door handle. Was I really going through with this? Was there another way? The memories of ignored warnings and dismissed concerns strengthened my resolve. I inserted my executive keycard and entered his immaculate office. The early morning light filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the minimalist furniture. I approached his desk, its glass surface spotless and organized. Carefully, I placed the master key in the center, accompanied by a handwritten note. "This key activates the emergency shutdown protocol I designed 3 years ago. By the time you read this, I will have initiated the sequence. All systems will go offline at 6:59 a.m. as a demonstration of the security vulnerabilities I've been warning about for months. No data will be lost and systems can be restored within 4 hours. This could have been a malicious attack rather than a controlled demonstration. We need to talk. Beatrice." I placed the note and key prominently on his desk where they couldn't be missed, then proceeded to my office. From my computer terminal, I accessed the legacy security system that still operated alongside the new implementation. Using my administrative credentials and a series of commands that hadn't been used since we tested the protocol years ago, I initiated the first sequence of the shutdown. A notification appeared on my screen: "Emergency protocol initiated. Phase 1 authentication complete. Awaiting system verification." I closed the program, gathered my belongings, and left the building. Across the street was a coffee shop with a clear view of the Nexus building. I ordered a latte and took a seat by the window, opening my laptop to monitor the progress remotely through a secure connection. At 6:45, the first systems began their shutdown sequence exactly as designed. Security logs would show unusual access patterns being detected, triggering automated protective measures. These measures would cascade through interconnected systems, eventually leading to a complete but controlled shutdown of the data center operations. My phone began buzzing with automated text alerts from the monitoring system. Warning: network anomalies detected in primary data cluster. Then, alert: security protocol Delta initiated in response to potential intrusion. And finally, critical cascading security response activated across all systems. Through the windows of the Nexus building, I could see the first IT staff arriving, rushing toward their workstations as they received the alerts. At 6:50, Michael's black Tesla pulled into his reserved parking space. He entered the building hurriedly, unaware of what awaited him. As the minutes ticked by, activity in the building increased visibly. People moved quickly between floors, gathered in clusters around monitors, made urgent phone calls. At exactly 6:59, as programmed, the final shutdown sequence completed. The entire data center went offline, severing connections to all client systems and internal networks. Even from across the street, I could sense the controlled chaos unfolding inside. Emergency lights activated in the data center section of the building, visible through the ground floor windows. My phone rang repeatedly, Michael's name flashing on the screen. I let the calls go to voicemail, knowing it was important that he find and read my note before we spoke. Security personnel could be seen responding to the emergency protocols, moving with practiced efficiency despite the unusual situation. Through the glass walls of the main conference room, I could see the executive team assembling hurriedly, most still in coats, some clutching coffee cups from their interrupted morning routines. At 7:15, I gathered my things and walked calmly back to the building. The atmosphere inside was tense, with staff huddled around workstations trying to understand what had happened. The IT department was a flurry of activity engineers, frantically attempting to restart systems that refused to respond to normal procedures. As I walked through the open office area toward the conference room where I could see the emergency meeting in progress, conversations hushed and heads turned to follow my passage. I maintained a composed expression, my focus on the confrontation to come. Through the glass walls, I saw Michael notice my approach. his face flushed with anger as he excused himself from the meeting and intercepted me in the hallway. "What the hell is going on?" he demanded, his voice low but intense. "Systems are down across the board. Clients are calling. The tech team is saying it looks like a coordinated shutdown." "Did you read my note?" I asked calmly. Recognition dawned in his eyes, quickly replaced by fury. "You did this. You deliberately shut down our systems. Do you have any idea what this could cost us?" "Far less than what your security vulnerabilities would eventually cost," I replied evenly. "This is a controlled demonstration. No data is at risk, and everything can be restored within hours." "This is sabotage," he hissed. "This is criminal." "This is a security drill," I corrected. "One that exposed exactly how vulnerable our systems have become under the new architecture. I've documented everything, including all my previous warnings that were ignored." Before he could respond, Bradford emerged from the conference room. "Michael, the board members are calling in. They want an emergency meeting in 30 minutes to discuss the situation." Michael glared at me. "This isn't over." He turned and strode back to the conference room, already on his phone, arranging the emergency board meeting. I returned to my office to collect my documentation and prepare for what would likely be the most important presentation of my career. The system shutdown had accomplished what months of warnings couldn't, but the real test was still to come. Now I needed to make them understand why this dramatic step had been necessary, and convince them to address the underlying security issues before a real attack occurred. The emergency board meeting was scheduled for 8:30 in the main conference room. By 8:15, the room was already filling with grim-faced executives and board members, joining both in person and via video conference. Our parents, who rarely came to the office anymore, had been called in and sat at one end of the long table, their expressions a mixture of concern and confusion. I took a seat at the far end of the table opposite Michael, and arranged my documentation neatly before me. The tension in the room was palpable, with whispered conversations stopping abruptly when I made eye contact with anyone. At precisely 8:30, Michael called the meeting to order. His opening statement was brief and direct. At approximately 7 a.m. this morning, Nexus experienced a complete system shutdown affecting all client services and internal networks. We have since discovered this was not an external attack or technical failure, but a deliberate action taken by a member of our executive team. He fixed me with a cold stare. "Beatrice Reynolds, our Director of Legacy Systems, has admitted to initiating this shutdown." Murmurs rippled through the room. Michael continued, his voice hardening. "This act of corporate sabotage has already caused significant disruption to our clients and will likely result in financial penalties under our service level agreements. I have called this emergency meeting to determine our immediate response and next steps." "If I may," I interjected, my voice calm but firm. "What occurred this morning was a security protocol implementation, not sabotage. As the documentation I'm distributing shows, I have been warning about critical vulnerabilities in our new system architecture for months. I passed copies of my comprehensive security analysis to everyone present, including printouts of all the previously ignored warnings and recommendations. The emergency shutdown protocol I activated was designed and approved by this company 3 years ago as a last resort measure in case of detected security threats. The current vulnerability in our system architecture represents exactly such a threat." For the next 20 minutes, I presented a methodical explanation of the security issues, simplifying technical concepts for the non-technical board members. I showed how the connection point between server clusters created an exploitable pathway that bypassed authentication protocols. I demonstrated through diagrams how a malicious actor could potentially access our entire system with minimal effort. To be clear, I emphasize this vulnerability exists today, right now, in our production systems. The only difference between my demonstration and a real attack is that I designed the shutdown to be recoverable with no data loss. A genuine attacker would have no such concerns for our business continuity. Michael interrupted, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Even if these alleged vulnerabilities exist, and that's a big if, there are proper channels for addressing security concerns. Unilaterally shutting down our entire operation is inexcusable and potentially actionable from a legal standpoint." I used every proper channel available to me, I countered, gesturing to the documentation. Page 12 contains a chronological list of all formal warnings and recommendations I submitted, along with the dates they were acknowledged but not acted upon. Page 15 shows the increasing restrictions placed on my role that prevented me from addressing these issues directly. The outside board members were reviewing my documentation with growing concern. Patricia Winters, a cybersecurity executive from another company who had joined our board the previous year, looked particularly troubled. "These vulnerabilities appear significant," she noted, looking up from the technical diagrams. "And the record of unaddressed warnings is concerning from a governance perspective." Michael shifted strategies. "Our security vendors assured us their implementation met industry standards. Beatrice's concerns reflect her preference for the custom systems she designed, not objective security assessments." Actually came a voice from the doorway. "Her assessment appears to be spot on." Harold Jensen, the company's founding lawyer of 35 years, entered the room, his tall frame stooped slightly with age, but his expression as sharp as ever. Behind him was James, the senior engineer, who had first alerted me to the security changes. "James has been analyzing the system architecture since the shutdown," Harold explained, taking a seat at the table. "He's confirmed the vulnerability Beatrice identified and found 2 additional weaknesses that could be exploited." Michael's face flushed. "With all due respect, Harold, this is an executive matter that directly impacts the legal liability of this company," Harold finished firmly. "As chief counsel, it's my duty to ensure Nexus doesn't expose itself to preventable legal risks. A data breach resulting from known but unaddressed vulnerabilities would constitute negligence." Michael slammed the master key down on the table in front of Harold. "She left this on my desk with a note announcing her intentions. This was a premeditated attack on our company operations." Harold picked up the key, examining it thoughtfully. "Ah, the master override. I remember when we implemented this protocol." He looked at me. "You still had this?" I nodded. "It was forgotten during the system transition. I found it in my old desk drawer." For those who don't remember, Harold addressed the room. This emergency protocol was designed with my input to protect client data in extreme circumstances. Its use is authorized under Section 7.3 of our security policies for any officer who identifies a critical security threat. The financial team had been analyzing the impact of the shutdown and now presented their findings. Thanks to the early morning timing, the actual client impact had been minimal. Most systems could be restored before the business day was fully underway, and the documented nature of the demonstration provided a defensible explanation to clients. The technical team confirmed what I had been saying all along: the vulnerability was real, significant, and could have led to catastrophic data breaches if exploited maliciously. As the evidence mounted, I could see Michael's position weakening. The board members' expressions had shifted from shock and anger to serious concern about the security issues. My parents exchanged glances, some unspoken communication passing between them. Finally, Michael addressed me directly, his voice quieter, but still tense. "Why didn't you come to me directly? Why this dramatic demonstration?" "I tried, Michael," I said, my professional facade cracking slightly to reveal the hurt beneath. "I requested meetings that were repeatedly rescheduled. I sent detailed analyses that were acknowledged but never discussed. I was systematically sidelined until I had no other way to make you understand the severity of the situation." "You could have gone to the board directly," he countered. "Would they have believed me over you?" I asked simply. "Or would it have been dismissed as sibling rivalry and sour grapes over the succession decision?" A uncomfortable silence fell over the room as the personal dimension of our professional conflict became impossible to ignore. Our father cleared his throat. "I think we need to acknowledge that mistakes were made at multiple levels here. The board, including your mother and I, failed to ensure proper checks and balances in our new governance structure. Michael, you dismissed legitimate security concerns from the person most qualified to raise them. And Beatrice, while your concerns were valid, your method of demonstrating them has created a crisis of confidence we now need to address." My mother nodded in agreement. "We built this company on partnership and mutual respect. Somewhere along the way, we lost sight of those values in our succession planning." Patricia spoke up again. "I move that the board immediately convene an executive session to discuss these issues and determine appropriate next steps. Given the technical complexity and personal dynamics involved, I suggest we take some time to deliberate carefully." The motion was quickly seconded and approved. As the room began to clear for the executive session, Michael and I found ourselves alone briefly near the door. "I never wanted it to come to this," I told him quietly. He looked at me, anger still present in his eyes, but mixed now with something else, perhaps a grudging recognition, You went nuclear to make a point. I did what was necessary to protect the company I corrected, the same company you and I both love despite our differences. We parted without further words, each heading to separate offices to await the board's decision. The waiting was excruciating, hours passing, as I alternated between reviewing documentation and staring out the window at the Seattle skyline. By mid-afternoon, I had convinced myself that my demonstration, while technically vindicated, would still result in my dismissal. I began mentally drafting my resignation letter, determined to exit with dignity, if that was to be my fate. At 4:30 that afternoon, I was summoned back to the boardroom. The executive session had concluded, and decisions had been reached. I steeled myself for the worst, as I took my seat at the table, noting that Michael looked as tense as I felt. Our father, acting as board chairman, delivered the verdict. After extensive deliberation, the board has determined that significant changes are required to address both the security vulnerabilities identified and the organizational issues that allowed them to develop unchecked. He paused, looking between Michael and me. Effective immediately, Nexus will implement a co-CEO model with clearly defined areas of responsibility. Michael will serve as CEO of Client Relations and Business Development, while Beatrice will serve as CEO of Technology and Security Operations. Both positions will report directly to the board, with neither subordinate to the other. I felt a surge of vindication mixed with surprise. This was more than I had dared hope for. Additionally, our father continued, all security protocols designed by Beatrice's team will be reinstated, while a comprehensive review of the global secure implementation is conducted by an independent third party. The board also mandates the creation of a security oversight committee, including outside experts, to ensure ongoing vigilance. After the meeting adjourned, Michael approached me in the hallway outside. His expression was difficult to read, a complex mixture of emotions playing across his face. "We should talk," he said simply. "Not here. Not as executives." We ended up at a small restaurant several blocks from the office, a neutral territory away from the corporate politics and family dynamics that had entangled us. For several minutes, we sat in awkward silence, each waiting for the other to begin. Finally, Michael spoke. "I owe you an apology." The words seemed to cost him considerable effort. "I got caught up in my vision for Nexus and stopped listening to expertise that didn't align with it. That was arrogant and ultimately dangerous for the company. I could have found better ways to make you understand the risks," I admitted. "Shutting down the systems was extreme, but effective," he acknowledged, with a hint of the old Michael, the brother I had collaborated with for years. "No one will ignore your security warnings again, that's for sure." That conversation marked the beginning of a difficult but necessary rebuilding process, both professionally and personally. The implementation of the co-CEO model wasn't smooth initially. We had to establish new boundaries, redefine decision-making processes, and learn to respect each other's domains without micromanaging. The company underwent significant restructuring in the following months. We developed enhanced security protocols that integrated the best elements of my original systems with newer technologies, creating a hybrid approach that was both robust and efficient. The Security Oversight Committee provided valuable external perspective and kept both of us accountable. Our parents suggested family therapy to address the business-family boundary issues that had contributed to the conflict. Initially, I resisted the idea, but eventually recognized its value. Those sessions revealed how our parents had unintentionally fostered competition between us from childhood, and how that pattern had carried into our professional relationship. "We always thought a little competitive spirit was healthy," our mother admitted during one particularly intense session. "We never realized how it undermined your ability to work as true partners." Publicly, we positioned the system Shutdown as a planned security exercise that had identified potential vulnerabilities before they could be exploited. This messaging, while not entirely accurate, prevented client panic and actually generated positive media coverage about Nexus's proactive security stance. One technology journal even published a feature article titled "Radical Transparency: How Nexus Data Systems Tests Its Own Defenses," presenting our approach as innovative rather than dysfunctional. Sometimes the narrative matters as much as the reality. The most difficult repair work was between Michael and me. The trust that had been broken couldn't be restored overnight. We started with small joint projects, gradually rebuilding our working relationship through shared successes. I made efforts to acknowledge his business insights, and he began to truly respect my technical expertise, rather than simply tolerating it. 6 months after the shutdown incident, we launched a new security product that combined his market vision with my technical innovation. The offering was immediately successful, attracting clients who had been hesitant to entrust their data to larger, less security-focused competitors. "We're better together than either of us is alone," Michael admitted during the launch celebration. I lost sight of that for a while. The co-CEO model eventually evolved into a genuinely collaborative leadership approach that leveraged our complementary skills. Michael excelled at identifying market opportunities and building client relationships, while I ensured our technical foundation remained solid and secure. The artificial division I had once resented became a strength when based on mutual respect rather than hierarchy. Throughout this journey, I learned valuable lessons about standing up for myself and my expertise. For too long, I had remained silent, while being systematically sidelined, choosing loyalty over confrontation. That silence nearly resulted in serious security breaches that could have damaged the company irreparably. I also gained a new perspective on communication. Technical experts like me often assume that detailed documentation should be sufficient to convince others of important issues. But I learned that sometimes a demonstration, even a dramatic one, communicates more effectively than any report ever could. Most importantly, I discovered that family business dynamics require constant attention and care. The bonds of family can be both a strength and a complication in professional settings. Clear boundaries, open communication, and formalized decision-making processes are essential to prevent personal relationships from undermining business operations. Today, nearly 2 years after that dramatic shutdown, Nexus is stronger than ever. Our security practices have become industry benchmarks, and our dual leadership model is studied as an effective approach to family business succession. Michael and I have found a balance that honors both our individual strengths and our shared heritage. Sometimes breaking systems is necessary to build them stronger, and sometimes the hardest person to stand up to is family, especially when professional and personal relationships are intertwined. But I've learned that true loyalty sometimes means challenging those you care about, rather than silently accepting decisions you know are wrong. I wonder if anyone else has had to take dramatic measures to be heard in their workplace or family business. Have you ever had to demonstrate your expertise in an unconventional way when normal channels failed? Share your experiences in the family comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to hear more stories about navigating the complex waters of family business dynamics. Also, if this story resonated with you, please share it with someone who might be struggling to have their voice heard in their professional life. Sometimes knowing you're not alone makes all the difference. Thank you for listening to my journey from sidelined sister to respected co-CEO.